Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. In today's episode, we got to talk about the 25 Vuelta a España because we have only 2 more days left before the Tour of Spain starts proper. This is the last third of the 25 season. Everything starts, of course, early stage races that aren't so important. Then you get into Paris-Nice, Torino Adriatico. Those become really important, and it leads into the classic seasons. The most magical thing about the classics is everybody is on form. They're all on form for the Basque Country. They're all on form for Paris-Roubaix. They're all on form for Tour of Flanders. And they're certainly on form for Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Amstel Gold, and Flèche Wallonne. So that time of the spring season is super easy to predict what riders' form is going to be like and who's going to be a hitter, especially when we're talking 2 days out. But now we're 2 days out from the Vuelta a España, and guys, they just finally got done listing the full rosters of all the teams that start in this year's Tour of Spain. But you look at the spring races, you absolutely know. You know that Mathieu van der Poel is saying, hey, I want to win Paris-Roubaix. You know that at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, Remco Evenepoel, Tadej Pogacar, those type first-page riders are trying to win those races. We know at the second time of the season, the only other peak time of the season outside of the classics there in April is July. When the Tour de France comes, we know the year before who wants to peak for the Tour de France. So it's easy to predict the spring classics and, of course, July when we're talking the Tour de France. You get into the Tour of Spain, it's a little bit different scenario. Right now, the first and second favorite here when we're talking Jonas Vingegaard and we're talking Almeida, on my list anyways, is the first and second favorites. Yes, Juan Ayuso's close. You can throw him in there as equal to those two riders. There's no doubt about it. But first and second on my list, Almeida, Jonas Vingegaard, we haven't even seen him race since the Tour de France. And Almeida crashed on that stage, Amur de Breton, and only went a couple more stages before he dropped out of the Tour de France and hasn't raced since. But because of his remarkable 25 season victories, and he has been remarkable. Almeida won Tour of the Basque Country, as I already mentioned. Everyone's on form during the Basque Country. That's when their form starts to reach their top, and they're coming into their best, and then they go over to the classics, especially when we're talking about the more mountainous classics like Amstel, Flèche, and Liège. Those riders are getting ready, and they're peaking, of course, at the Basque Country that Almeida won. He carried it in and through Romandy, little bit less on form through Romandy, but still won, and that's what makes his form so special. He wasn't even on his best form and still won Romandy. Then he left Romandy, went into Tour of Suisse, and dominated Tour of Suisse with 3 stage wins and the overall. What did we see out of July, out of Almeida? He was on fantastic form. There's no doubt about that. It was just bad luck that ended his run at the 25 Tour de France. Same with Jonas Vingegaard. He starts the season a little bit off on form, crashes at Paris-Nice, so doesn't have much luck. Dauphiné, he runs up there with Tadej Pogacar to go second overall. So we know he's got some good form, and he runs second at the Tour de France because the peak seasons are easy to see in April and the Tour de France in July. But now we come into August and September at the Tour of Spain. You don't know. It's a little bit ifs all over the place on what riders' forms are going to look like. When I won the Vuelta a España in 2013, Vincenzo Nibali, who went on to win Grand Tours, he won all 3 Grand Tours. He won the Tour of Spain, he won the Giro that year in 2013, and later he went on to win the Tour de France in 2014. But at 2013 at the Tour of Spain, when I won and I beat Vincenzo Nibali, one of the legendary riders of my era, I'll tell you honestly, there's no doubt about it. He's coming in a kilo or a kilo and a half heavier than his best form. So at that moment, I didn't know going into the Tour of Spain when I won in 2013 that I could win, but I knew early enough in the first week. I knew when I won stage 3 of the Vuelta a España, when my wife met me up at the top after the ceremony procedures and I walked down off the podium and saw my wife, I whispered in her ear, I think I can win the Vuelta a España, because I knew by stage 3 that there was something magical with my form and it was the best that I had ever had. I knew I was the lightest weight I ever was, and I knew I was producing the best numbers. And when I dropped the field on stage 3 on the summit finish there, I knew that those were spectacular numbers. So at that moment, I started getting rid of any ifs, ands, and buts, and knew at that moment that my form was exceptional. Then I needed to start playing for the win. But when you look at other riders starting this year at the 25 edition, We have not seen Jonas race. We have not seen Almeida race. Juan Ayuso went second to his teammate Del Toro recently, so we know he's got some form, but does he have his best? We don't know that, and that's where the director sportifs or the coaches of these teams from Visma Lease Bike and UAE Team Emirates, the two strongest teams starting the Vuelta a España, their coaches and their director sportifs get what kind of advantage over us fans sitting on the Chesterfield? Well, they get to see the power meter from the riders. They get to understand that what the weight is of the rider because they get to see him in person and they get to ask him the question, Jonas, how much do you weigh? Oh, how much do you weigh at the Tour de France? Oh, you weigh the same at the Tour de France. How are you putting out the numbers on your power meter after the end of a 5 and 6 hour training ride? Oh, the same kind of power numbers that you produced at the Tour de France. Okay, we know you're on magical form. That's good fitness. Now, you guys have heard me drag a little bit on Jonas Vingegaard talking about how he was only second at the Tour de France, but make no mistake about it. If you're not Jonas Vingegaard, that's a magical result. But when you compare Jonas Vingegaard to years past, you know he wants to go better. But if his numbers are as good as this year's 25 edition of the Tour de France, that's why I would have him as the first favorite. So if you're the director sportif or the coach, and you know his weight, you know his power numbers, you know the way he's been training, you start understanding realistically, quickly, before the Tour of Spain starts, whether or not if he's racing for a podium position or if he's racing for the general classification. Let's say the coach is looking at Jonas Vingegaard's power numbers and they're off by a few watts, 4, 5, 6, maybe 10. Then you have to start having some questions about what tactics you might play when we start getting into stage 2. Stage 2 is a summit finish, but guys, it's a 5.5% up to the finish, and that is not really a climbing stage, but it is one that will make some selection in the professional peloton at this year's Tour of Spain. But if you do not have at least some close power numbers to your best that you've shown in the past, if you're missing 15 or 20 watts and you're still running a little bit heavy, you might get dropped on stage 2. So right away, after the first week of racing at the Tour of Spain, it starts becoming really clearer and clearer as each mountain stage, and of course, after the team time trial stage, what realistic chance that your rider has of winning the Tour of Spain in 2025. Again, when we go back into 2013, guys, I thought I was playing for top 5, maybe if I was on really good form, a podium, but it took me only into stage 3 before, as I already told you, I'm whispering to my wife, I got the form to win the Vuelta a España. So we start looking at the team tactics. If Jonas Vingegaard has that top form that he performed second at the Tour de France with, if he has last year's 2024 tournament form that he had at the Tour de France, well, we already know he is the #1 outright favorite on his own page to be able to win this year's 25 edition of the Tour of Spain. But let's say he comes with 25 Tour de France form, and Almeida still has been able to reproduce his top numbers after the crash on the backside of Mur de Bretagne. If he can produce his top numbers and Jonas is a little bit off, now all of a sudden we start realistically realizing that Almeida has the same type form as Jonas. And then when we look over to UAE Team Emirates' second favorite here, Juan Ayuso, when his numbers are looking the same as they did at the early parts of the season. Remember, he won Trino Adriatico. He won a stage against Primoz Roglic at Vuelta Catalonia. So if those numbers are appearing already the week before the Tour of Spain starts, UAE Team Emirates have to think twice about who's going to be their race leader when Almeida possibly could not be producing the same numbers at this moment. Doesn't mean Almeida could not get into the first week of the Tour of Spain and all of a sudden produce magical numbers that we saw early in the season that brought him those 3 big-time victories and that fantastic ride at the 25 Tour de France before he crashed out. So the director sportifs have to be very careful. When we look at UAE Team Emirates and we go into the 25 Giro d'Italia, we see what or we take what out of that 25 Giro d'Italia. Del Toro was amazing, but they held Del Toro back to help Juan Ayuso. They held Del Toro back on the stage that Richard Carapaz went up the road and won that stage and did what? He gained time on Del Toro. So the director sportifs made some tactical mistakes, but they were ones that you could not necessarily know that Del Toro was going to take his form to that next level and could not understand that later when we talking about Juan Ayuso that he was going to be suffering from his crash on stage 9, and then of course later he has the bee sting to the eye where he's dropping out around stage 18 of the Giro. But if you knew that, if you could foresee the future when no one can, that's why there's a bunch of ifs in sports. If there wasn't ifs, we'd all be betting on sports instead of just watching it. But we know that from that Giro that when you have two riders on UAE Team Emirates, you have to start thinking about it again here at the Vuelta a España. Which one of the two riders is going to be the most important of the two? Now, I couldn't tell you up here on the podium and be on the coverage, but if I had their power meters and if I had communication with them and you could talk about what those power numbers mean, how they felt on their training rides, then you can start to understand how a rider is going to perform throughout at least the first week of the Tour of Spain in 2025. Because this is not April and this is not July. This is August and September, and riders' forms are up, down, left, right, center, all over the place. Riders could come good and blow up, or riders could just stay exactly where they are. Again, 2013, Vincenzo Nibali started in the Vuelta a España. There's no doubt about it that his best form when he won the Tour de France in 2014 would have beat my form at the Tour of Spain in 2013, but he didn't have that. What I did notice throughout the 2013 Vuelta a España, though, is Vincenzo Nibali was getting a little bit better and a little bit better day by day, week by week, until we got into the third week where we battled on the Angliru, battling neck and neck. He dropped me 7 different times going up the Angliru, and I had to pull him back and then was able to drop him with just 1 kilometer to go on the final mountain climb of the 2013 Vuelta a España. It took all the way to stage 20, the last and final climbing stage of the Vuelta a España in 2013, before we knew exactly who was going to win. And I couldn't even tell you. And halfway up the Angliru, I thought I was going to lose the Tour of Spain that year while I was wearing the race leader's red jersey, but dug a little bit deeper. And then finally, Vincenzo Nibali dropped 1 kilometer from the summit, and I was able to wrap up the first Vuelta a España victory for the United States and take that home, and now I get to keep it forever. So keep in mind, when you start the Vuelta a España and you're watching from the Chesterfield, anything can happen as the race evolves. We know at this moment one specific rider, Mads Pedersen, he's on good form. There's no doubt about that because he just got done winning three stages and the overall classification there in Denmark. And we know he's coming into the Vuelta a España super motivated after Lidl Trek left him off the roster of the Tour de France. So with the exception of Mads Pedersen, I couldn't tell you 100% who's on form. But when we start looking at the top 10 favorites, or at least the top 9, I'm going to give you, outside of Jonas, Almeida, Juan Ayuso, I'm going to say Mikel Landa has to be the 4th of the favorites. We look a little bit further, I'll say Jai Hindley, Tiberi there from Bahrain Victorious, Ciccone, Egan Bernal, and Ben O'Connor always seems to find a way to get a results in Grand Tours. So if we don't see him at least winning a stage, we could possibly see him, of course, up on the top 3 podium, because Ben O'Connor just always finds a way to get up the break, gain some extra time, and then go good in the general classification of Grand Tour races, if not win stages. So I have about 9-10 riders, of course, that are favorites for the general classification, but none bigger than the first 3. Those are outright favorites. And Mikel Landa, hopefully he's recovered from the Giro d'Italia, but he's only raced Burgos since then of that stage 1 crash at the Giro. But we know for sure that the Basque rider from Spain has magical legs most times at Grand Tours, and I would expect nothing less than Mikel Landa to come back and shine for Soudal Quickstep and perform and ride a top 5, here at the Vuelta a España, if not a podium, because Mikel Landa is quality rider. But we start looking a little bit deeper and we start seeing some outside riders. Well, Tom Pidcock's here, so he could highlight some of the stages, maybe battle a little bit against Mads Pedersen when we're talking about those 3 semi-classic type stages of 3, 11, and 19 at this year's Vuelta a España. There's really only those 3 stages that are set up ideally for Mads Pedersen if he's coming in with the whole peloton intact and he has to win from there. Otherwise, we look at those 5 sprint stages when we're talking about stage 1, we're talking 4, 8, 15, and of course 21. Jasper Philipsen's on the list. Jasper Philipsen's my favorite as the outright pure sprinter here at the Tour of Spain, if not the world of European cycling. Jasper Philipsen is the best of the best in my book, along with Tim Miller. So we look at those 5 stages. Jasper Philipsen's Albacete de Koenig team should be controlling those stages. Mads Pedersen should be controlling the next 3 classic type stages that I already listed off for you guys. And that leaves us with what? That leaves us with 11 mountain stages there that the GC guys and the teams of UAE Team Emirates and Visma Bike have to decide whether or not if they want to control this year's Vuelta a España or not. When we look outside of that, well, there's only 2 other stages left. It's the team time trial on stage 5, and it's the individual time trial that doesn't come until the final week of the 25 Vuelta a España, and that's stage 18. Those 2 stages can have massive impacts if we're talking Jonas Vingegaard is not bringing his absolute top best form, and we're talking UAE Team Emirates will come up to the level or equal level there of Jonas Vingegaard. So we could see a magical Tour of Spain here. Every year, it always seems to deliver excitement while you're sitting on the Chesterfield. So like and subscribe. I'll see you guys for tomorrow's last and final butterfly effect beyond the coverage, before we get into the butterfly effect on stage 1 of the Vuelta a España 2025. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys real soon.